Welcome back to MSP Confidential, folks. We're here once again every Friday, unless we're not. Sometimes, travel and things like that get in the way of getting out the regular schedule. But I've got an incredible guest joining me today, Stephen Freidkin, CEO and founder of Ntiva. Stephen, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
It's great to be here. Glad to join you all. Happy Friday.
Oh, did we lose your audio? Give me 2 secs. Let's see if we can't sort this real quick.
Try that again.
Let me kill the AirPods. How about now? I got you back. There we go.
All right.
Yeah,
Well, I don't know if others can hear me, but it's great to be here. Happy Friday, everyone.
yeah, man. No, if I can hear you, then the folks can hear you for sure. Well, thanks for joining me, man. We were chatting so much over the last couple of days about work, about culture, about psychology, about super interesting things. And one of the things that I reached out to you about to come on the podcast to talk about was a post of yours on LinkedIn. You were talking a little bit about a project you guys had at Ntiva called Natalie. You're deploying an AI chatbot, and perhaps, so I don't butcher the story, maybe you can just speak a little bit about what Natalie was and the learning that you had around this changed leadership challenge, which I thought was so interesting.
Yeah, for sure. And again, it's great to be here and spend some time together today. Real quick, Natalie is Ntiva's artificial thought and language intelligence engine. We actually built her about 2 years ago with a few objectives in mind. Of the most brilliant minds at our company came together to build this, and it was simple, right? Bring the email requests that come into ConnectWise, parse them out so we understand all the technical requests that are being made by the client, provide the top 5 internal troubleshooting steps that have been done to solve the problem before, provide the top 5 external troubleshooting steps, prioritize the ticket based on SLAs. So again, trained based on how to do priority, assign to the right tech to do the support, and then do sentiment analysis. If the client's happy, green, if they're meh, yellow, and if they're upset, red, because we have these amazing left brain engineers that have customer service training, but don't always know when to turn it on. So we build this actually pretty quickly and go to deploy it, and it works. But the entire team on the ground was throwing up all over it, saying it wasn't working. They don't like it. It's not imagined correctly. And so what we did was we actually pulled it completely and built committees from the ground up, right? So we took our service desk folks and we brought them into the process of designing Natalie, and we got their feedback on what they would like to have it do to make their lives easier. And ultimately, our common goal was to improve first touch resolution, right? Like if we can improve from first touch resolution from 70% to 90%, we're more efficient, our clients are happier, we're making more money, our techs are less frustrated, things don't get lost in the ether, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, long and short of it is, a couple months into these committees, all the requirements get developed, and we roll Natalie out again. The funny part of it was nothing changed with Natalie from a technical perspective. So there was huge early learning for us, which is, this is threatening, it's new, it's different. By no means did we build it to take away anyone's jobs, but there was a component of it that created anxiety for people. And when they were ultimately included in the process and could take ownership over the design of the product, they embraced it fully versus push away. So that's been a huge real life lesson for us that we've been able to apply for other rollouts and ultimately advise our clients on to improve change management and adoption.
I think there's an interesting point to be made about, especially with technical people, logical brains, left brain, as you call it, the sense of agency. And I think ownership and accountability is one thing, but the sense of agency is maybe a very different stream of that. I don't know that we talked or prepared to have a conversation about agency, but But your thoughts on agency and how you create a culture of giving people in the organization agency for some of these things, and how is that working out now at an organization of 800 plus people? Because I imagine problems also scale in different ways.
Yeah, so Louis, I know we talked on and off the last couple of days, but the truth is I forgot most of the conversation. So whatever we bring up today is gonna be fresh for the audience. But it's hard. The short answer to this is we're still figuring it out. I'm a big believer that agency or autonomy, whatever you want to call it, is one of the key motivators for really intelligent, great people, right? I mean, I think it was Dan Pink that talks about autonomy, mastery, and purpose being more important than financial compensation as long as basic needs are being met. So, it's imperative that we create that autonomy or that agency. And my mind goes to struggles, right? We're a large organization with 800 plus people, and we are constantly trying to cascade messages throughout the organization so people understand what's going on. And it wasn't working, right? Like people weren't getting the right messaging, or they were feeling like they were just being told what to do. And so much of that was a result of us not having the right muscle in place where we're leading with the why, and we're including people in being able to ask questions about that why to solve the problem. And oftentimes doing that and just slowing down a little bit to do that up front allows for the adoption curve and the engagement to really improve. So, when we're trying to push something really fast to get through the system, we're really learning, slow down, start with the why, engage folks in the conversation. By the way, most often when we do that, we learn things we didn't think about before that we're able to include. That happened to not be the case with Natalie, but 9 out of 10 times we miss something, we hear something, we add something, and then it becomes their own. They own it and they feel a part of it, and they're ultimately operating at their highest and best level as a result.
Yeah, this muscle piece is interesting too. Maybe let me frame it in the maturity model of culture, if you will, because there's a lot of small MSPs. People talk about the average MSP in the industry being sub 10 people, and it's a very different muscle of culture at that size versus 800 folks. And I'm curious if you feel like this is a muscle that you should have built much earlier in your journey. Or is it the kind of thing that you just kind of have to embrace as the need kind of arises through scale and growth and challenges? Because different problems at 10 people than 800 obviously, but the maturity of model of that, if you will.
I got to be very transparent with you, right? I actually think it's a muscle that we had that atrophied. It's a muscle that weakened as we grew. When we were smaller, that agency, that autonomy, that inclusion, that ownership, that like literally anyone could wear any hat, we're all getting it done together, was organic and natural. What I didn't understand is as we grew and put in layers and different departments and different responsibilities, you can't just assume that's going to happen anymore. You actually have to be intentional about it, right? So I was like, what happened? Like how could we have fallen back in these areas? And ultimately it was because I didn't put the intention behind it. I took for granted that when we were a smaller group, having everybody in the room where it's happening, everybody involved in every decision, everybody solving every problem together, it just happened organically and naturally versus at larger scale, really needing to give it intention.
Yeah, maybe if you'll allow me to double click and get a little personal on this, because it's interesting. I think that obviously as organizations grow, the roles will organically narrow quite a lot. And I think some folks either feel like their multiple hat wearing accountabilities are being stripped from them, or they see it as maybe an opportunity to get prioritization and focus in the thing that they're really better at doing. And I'm just curious how you've navigated a little bit of this, because one thing is the muscle of accountability and all that, but the other one is just how individuals are navigating this, and from a leadership standpoint, the awareness of it and how you help people address some of this through growth.
Yeah, Lewis, it's again, it's so hard to give a like a one size fit all answer. And I want to be clear, like my experience purely comes from mistakes I've made and lessons I've learned along the way. So like I don't have a brilliant answer that's going to cover everything here. But what I would say is individuals tend to want what they don't have, right? Think grass is always greener, right? When you're 10 people and everybody is working extra hours every day and are pulled into the on-call emergencies and helping with the password reset one moment, climb into a ceiling and running a wire, and then helping the accounting team on an invoice the next day, they're all going, this sucks. I just want to focus on what I am best at. You hired me to be a system engineer. I don't want to do any of those things. I just want to focus on, Active Directory or backups or virtualization or whatever it might be, right? Then you grow and you scale and you give them exactly what they asked for. And now they're out of the loop and they're disappointed. And by the way, again, I am hyperbolizing, right? So I'm giving you the
Yeah.
extremes here. But like then it's like, well, now I don't know what's going on with this. And they want to go and jump into that other thing. So what I've seen as to be the best mix so far, and I'm open-minded to more, is you're in your role. You have your clear responsibilities, but you're part of one broader team. So if you're nailing your responsibilities, we encourage you to get involved in other things, try and see what other people are doing, spend extra hours on the things that are exciting to you and you're passionate about, and then rotate regularly, right? So if this year you're like just focused on backup operations and you may want to switch to a different function in the future to mix it up, like we want to encourage that, right? Like that's not bad. That is actually making you a well-rounded, broader technician or team member. And so we would encourage that. But there's no one size fits all here. And I think it's so important to recognize that. And at the end of the day, I think we're all, this audience is all MSPs. Believe it or not, even though we're deploying technology, we are a people business. For the most part,
Totally.
short of an occasional Natalie here or there, like we're not making our own intellectual property. So at the end of the day, our product is our people. And it is so important, again, to slow down, get to know our people, get to know what makes each individual tick, and then support that in their career development. And frankly, even if they're saying they want one thing, you can push back and challenge based on how well you understand them. And the truth is, if your team members know that you care about them and they genuinely care about you and the overall organization, you're able to have, I guess what I would call a carefrontational conversation where you're able to say, hey, I know you're telling me you want to narrow your focus and just be on backups, but I see how big and bright your smile is when you jump from thing to thing to thing, even though you're in the back room complaining to me how hard you worked that day, right? Like I know it's coming off as whining, but your facial expressions, you're just literally glowing in excitement for all the different problems you solved. Are you sure you want to narrow that focus, right? And then sometimes when you do that and the person knows that it's coming from a place of really deep connection and love, it kind of lifts something from their subconscious into their conscious and allows them to see a potential blind spot.
Mm. I love that. It's kind of this shared conscientiousness, creating a bit of the awareness, helping people kind of tune into their own wavelengths of the things that, because it's a tough job. And I don't know how you got your start. I got my start as an accidental business owner, and part of the things that I wanted to get into IT to do is because I love playing with the things, turning the screws, the servers and the blinky lights, as I like to say often. And the transition for me between those things and then growing a team and then managing a team, it meant also giving up some of the other things that I really, really liked or that I thought was part of my identity to some, length. And so I'm curious some of your maybe identity changes through your journey, which I think is super interesting.
Yeah, look, you can't take me away from the noise. Like I sleep best to the hum of a server, right? Like the white noise, like I love it. The blinky lights, the like it's part of who I am, and I'm not gonna let you ever take that away from me. However, as my career advanced, and again, I can give you more on my backstory. I learned that like in order for me to progress and for me to ultimately have the impact that I want, that supported my why of helping people grow with technology as the accelerator. Again, that's a longer story potentially for another day. I had to come to terms with the fact that just because I am comfortable with something, I'm comfortable with the white noise, I'm comfortable with the blinky lights, it's safe for me there. I know what I'm doing. I know it won't talk back to me. I know it won't judge me for the clothes I'm wearing.
Hmm.
I had to get comfortable being uncomfortable to ultimately grow. So I find myself in environments often that are not the ones that are safe or comfortable, but I've learned to embrace it and lean into it because every time I do, I learn and I grow, which is incredibly rewarding to me. And then being able to share some of those experiences with others really is the cherry on top.
Yeah, I love that. I think this is we were talking about wisdom a little bit, and this intersection of logic and emotion, as you put it, is how you define wisdom, and I love that. And I think this is the thing that over time, people either challenge their identity or try to remove the definition of their identity from being attached to the craft, which I think is so interesting, and sort of getting into this place of impact, of outcomes, of teamwork, of this mushy thing that is the humans, right? The people. So I love that. The wisdom piece. This is interesting. An organization, I think, has this collective wisdom, if you will. And I'm curious how you've seen this collective wisdom of Intiva maybe evolve over the years. And obviously, people come and go. The wisdom kind of stays or goes. And what have you seen in terms of the maybe shared collective consciousness of wisdom inside the org?
Man, it's so hard to give a clear, simple answer to that, right? So in addition to us having been around for 25, 30 years at this point, and that wisdom being inside of the company, not just tied to any individual, it's also important to know we've done about 25 different acquisitions. So each one of those that we do comes with its own set
Mm.
that we ultimately want to learn from and grow from together, right? It doesn't matter how big or small it is. So, it's a constant. I'm trying to think about how to like how we would look at this, right? It's for me remembering the biggest mistakes, right? I know that kind of sounds crazy, but the best things that pass on between companies and that pass on year over year is the memory of those mistakes, not just tied to a person, but in general, so that they're not repeated, right? So I'm a big believer of making only original mistakes, but make the mistake, but
Mm.
let it be original. And not only for yourself, but have the courage to share that with others so that they can learn and grow from it as well. So our goal is to continue to create and develop a culture that embraces mistakes and errors, but does it in a way that learns and grows from it so they're not repeated. And I believe, at least from my seat, that's how we create that wisdom that outlasts any one entity or one individual and becomes part of the collective wisdom of the organization.
Yeah, we were talking a little bit about mistake making, and I reference Ray Dalio quite a bit in my conversations because in his book Principles, he talks about sort of this error log, if you will, that they instituted because at a finance company that has a lot of things at stake, not the least of which is money for their customers. I think mistakes have a very deep and traumatic effect, but they realized that they couldn't punish people for making mistakes, but they had to make sure that they surfaced the mistakes so they could learn from them. And so let's just say the reprimands shifted to not reporting the mistake, not being transparent with the thing that had failed or
Yeah.
happened that needed to be improved. And that sort of created, in his case, he talks about this radical transparency era in his business that was completely life changing for them. And so I'm getting a bit of that vibe of that's so important to have that transparency to be able to grow from it.
Uh,
Otherwise, yeah.
100%, 100%. There's so much to unpack there. First, it has to be safe to make the mistake. And let me tell you one big thing that at least for me made it safe. And I learned this from a colleague in a completely different entity. I had a situation where one of my managers, this is like 10 years ago at this point, did something awful. Like they wound up, and it was on accident, but it was frankly due to negligence. They weren't paying attention, and they made a huge mistake that wound up taking down a server about 3,000 miles away, and we had nothing to do but call up that customer with our tail between the legs and say, "I'm so sorry. I know it's Saturday at 6 o'clock in the morning. I need you to send someone there." Like we had no one that could do it. We didn't have access, so on and so forth. It was awful. The client actually wound up getting so frustrated that they said, "Oh, well, we need a local provider going forward." So they actually terminated us that Monday. And so I was talking to my colleague about this, and I was so upset, and I took this so personally, and I worked so hard for that client for so many years, and this one mistake, because he wasn't paying attention, cost us that client. And I was like, we need to let this person go. And this colleague of mine goes to me and he goes, "If you let him go, what do you get?" And I pause. I'm like, "I don't understand. What do you mean?" He's like, "If he goes to one of your competitors, what do they get?" And I
Yeah.
paused for a minute and I thought about it, and I was like,
The learned experience.
holy moly, this guy's not going to repeat this. This guy's been actually great for many years. It was one mistake, and the severity of it, I can't go back. I can't fix the client. I can't make it so they don't leave me, right? But what I can do is let this person know that this was unacceptable. It cannot be tolerated again. But we appreciate all that he's done. We expect him not to make that mistake again. We expect him to share it with courage in front of others, right? And now we've retained that wisdom of that mistake that then wouldn't get made again versus reacting and having them leave and go somewhere else with that new knowledge, right? And even as I tell you this story now, I'm going to put a note down and I'm going to call that customer back. It's been years. I'm going to see if we can win them back because the truth is they shouldn't have let us go either because we now have that muscle and we've never made that same error again. So,
Well, let's get into that a little bit. I find this fascinating. The grace that we create for ourselves in situations like that. Do you think there would have been an approach to the relationship, the way that the customer was maintained? Never mind the technical delivery, because I think those things are very binary. But maybe the more nuanced relationship piece that could have prevented, the termination of the contract.
look, for sure, the specific scenario was one where they were really challenged by us not having somebody physically available that could take care of this for them, right? So obviously, at that moment, we could have reacted and said, "Oh, we'll hire somebody there, or we'll have a contractor available, et cetera, et cetera." But at that point, I think their decision was made. Now, of course, Lewis, if you have the right relationships and they're strong, they usually will get past one incident. So I imagine in this case, they were already thinking about this for other reasons. So this may have just been the catalyst. But really, really just just owning it and sharing what we did, right? Like as an example, like I do want to reach out to this client, and I'm not making this up, because ever since that incident, not only did we not repeat that technical error, but as we look at new target customers, we don't take any that are within or outside of a 50-mile radius of our team members or our centers of excellence in the US. And we're constantly fighting with the sales team over that. Well, but we could do this here, but we could do that there. And even in those cases, having a third party vendor that we use for that, it's not the same. We can't rely on them to the same level. So that was our learning, right? And so, and now we happen to have folks near that office from that client 10 years ago. So
Yeah.
hopefully that.
You've talked a little bit about how Ntiva exists in a way for people to grow each other. And I think this is it's so interesting when people have built the things that they now find so core and elemental to their existence. The hindsight is always 2020. It's like, oh yeah, we obviously this is our core value, or this is how we operate. Um, but I don't know that sometimes people that are coming up necessarily are thinking in those patterns, are thinking in that type of culture. And I'm curious, like, what got you to this point of like we really lean into this, we help each other grow piece.
Yeah, look, I mean, I want to be sensitive to time here and really focus on what's meaningful to the audience. I mean, big picture, this is a longer story, but I started doing this in middle school, high school, grew organically by word of mouth and referral for 15 years plus, right? And the business just grew and grew and grew. And it grew without intention. It grew because we did good work. It grew because customers referred us to other customers. It grew because team members referred other great team members and stayed. And one day I woke up in, I don't know, maybe it was 2015 at this point, and we were about 100 people. And I couldn't keep my finger on the pulse of everything that was going on any longer. Before it was like I knew it was happening with every client, I knew it was happening with every employee. Maybe it was 80 people, but somewhere around there. And so what we did was we elevated engineers into management roles, and they did a fine job. The trains were running on time, clients were taken care of, but I noticed a material energy difference inside of the business. The best way I could describe it is like before, people would run through walls either because I asked them to or they were following me. And this is, I'm over exaggerating the next statement, but it sort of just felt like people moved to like a 9 to 5 job and they're kind of like checked out. They do their job. It's good enough, but let's go from there. So we at the time we were really only in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, DMV, and we were supporting clients all over the place. And I asked myself a question, right? Like, should I move to K Street in Washington, D.C. and support law firms within a 3 block radius and shrink to 40 people where I could keep my pulse on everything and it feels right and we're doing this? Or do I want to keep growing? And I had no idea. Like, I really, truly had no idea. All I knew at that point was it felt different and I didn't like how it felt. Um, so I challenged myself. And by the way, this is a theme through my journey. Like there's always these like inflection points where I'm so blessed to be able to just think and pause and then reset with intention. And at this particular inflection point, it was, do I shrink, simplify, keep my finger on the pulse, or do I grow? What do I want to do? This has been going on for so long. And I kept coming back in my mind as I'm thinking about this to two repeat scenarios. The first would happen about 30% of the time. I'd be at like a local networking or philanthropic event. I'd have a name tag on that would say Steve Ntiva. And I'd notice, like at the bar getting a drink, whatever, I noticed the name of one of our customers. So I'd go in and introduce myself and say, hi, I'm Steven. They go, oh, I know Ntiva. We use Ntiva. Ever since we started using Ntiva, our technology has just worked. So we've been able to focus on growing our
Mm.
business. And that would be like the best, like that. the nicest thing anybody could say to me was that, right? Like it literally would like I'm tingling now as I think that through.
Yeah.
Like it gave me tons of energy. What would happen even more often though, so I'd say this is 90% of the time, 9 out of 10 times, back in that same time frame, every new team member we would bring on within 90 to 180 days of them starting, I'd sit down with them and I would have coffee or lunch, and the conversation like would start almost identically every single time, and the team member would say, in the 3 to 6 months I've been here, I've learned and grown more than my prior job and or formal education. And you might as well have like stuck me up to a gas tank, filled me up completely. I had enough energy to go, 2 weeks, 16 plus hours a day just on that one coffee, right? So what I had realized through all of that is the side effect of what we were doing was creating a company that existed to grow people, and technology was simply the accelerator of that growth. Somehow, thank you, tingling feelings, and by the way, judge me all you'd like, but like when these little tingles come, it's a sign that I'm authentic, that I'm speaking my truth, and it's telling me something I may not even know. And so I lean into that and I go, okay, this is my impact. This is part of what I want to leave behind. How can I broaden that impact and spread the positive growth and other effects that I'm looking to give to the world? And it was that point where I said, okay, we're going to keep growing. Now, it just so happened that we happened to be in a good space where bigger and bigger companies needed what we did. Frankly, the core service of what we were delivering was becoming commoditized, but there was opportunity to scale and bring in, sales resources for the first time. There was already companies that were consolidating, like Mindshift and All Covered, and I knew like we had an opportunity to do this differently, right? Like if the industry is consolidating while it's growing, and we're going to stand for a purpose of growing people, then I want it to be a consolidator and not the consolidated. And, sort of the rest is history. And that's been true to our ethos ever since. And I'll tell you, Lewis, it's fascinating. All it took, like, I didn't change the managers, I didn't change anything. I was just able to get up in front of the team at the time. And I think I said this earlier, but lead with the why. We exist to grow each other. That is why we show up every day. That is why we run through walls. This is the impact we make. And then suddenly the managers were able to manage their teams in ways that had them running. And then that's, by the way, it's not without issue over the years and acquisitions and new lessons learned at different levels. But like each time we come back to that, we're able to scale and grow to a new plateau.
I love that, man. So powerful. One of the, I guess, challenges of a growing company at the size you guys are at is obviously you're blazing new trails a lot. I've heard some of the other platforms talk about this. It's uncharted territory in some cases. And you're talking a little bit about having brought a new COO into the org that has maybe seen some of this much bigger turning wheels in their experience before. And this is an interesting inflection point because the average MSP, I think, tends to want to hire in their own image, the owner, the operator. And it's an exercise in frustration a lot of the time. And that saying that goes around is surround yourself with people smarter than you is kind of comes to mind. But I want to ask you about this experience for yourself. Firstly, of when you realized the team needed to be bigger than just what your role is, but also for the team, what this does for them.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much there, right? So first, what you said is true. Like, regardless of whether there's somebody in the room that's worked in bigger companies, MSPs focusing on SMB with, similar target customer profile to Ntiva, They just don't exist. Like, I mean, they do exist, plenty exist, but they don't exist at scale beyond that which the Integruses and the Ntivas and many others, but a very select few others have been doing, right? And so it's super challenging because it is uncharted waters, and we are all kind of trying to figure this out together and learn and grow together. With that said, I've been blessed with a really fantastic board, and for a few years they've really been pushing me like, hey, Stephen, you really need somebody in the room with you that's done this before at scale. And then I go, yeah, but those only exist with enterprise customers, and it's an
Mm.
entirely different market. No, no, no. And they're like, bless them, right? Like, because they didn't like shove it down my throat, but they're like, when you have the right fit, it's going to click and it's going to make sense to you. And so I wound up going down and just looking at what's out there. And as I started to interview to see if there was somebody that's done this at scale bigger, it's fascinating. I'll vulnerably share a somewhat embarrassing story. Um, I think I shared earlier that we were struggling with cascading messages to hundreds and hundreds of people. Things would get lost in the game of telephone. People would feel excluded, not understanding the why. It was not working. We have operated off EOS, or the entrepreneurial operating system, for many years. We were thinking, have we outgrown it? What's going on? We're doing these level 10s, we're cascading these messages, we have these rocks, like what's happening? And each time we would have an executive team meeting or a senior leadership team meeting, we would all be talking about it, and we'd all agree it's a problem, and we'd all be guessing on what solutions to put to the table. And then 2 years into all of this, with so many messages that could have been better, that could have led to better outcomes and more growth for our people, we're still here treading water. And so we get together, we're in an in-person meeting, and we spend like a good 2.5 hours. And there's one colleague of mine in there who's leveraging Chat GPT, and he's running all the problems through. And he goes, this is talking about OKRs, objectives and key results. Here's how they work. Here's how you focus. Here's how this. And he throws it out on the board, and you got a lot of nodding heads. You got questions like, yeah, that makes sense, right? That makes sense. And so as I'm doing these interviews in parallel to this, I'm not telling them my drama, right? Like, I'm not telling them this story, but I just throw out the problem. We're struggling with cascading messages. We're struggling with prioritization. We're struggling with our team members really understanding the why so they can operate with agency on autonomy, things we talked about earlier, to get the job done. Like, they're all adults, they're all growing, they're all brilliant. We're so blessed with all these great people. What the hell?
Right.
And they stop me. And they're like, oh, that's what OKRs are for. And I'm like, uh-huh, duh. Right? It only took me how many thousands of dollars of our team's time and years of missed messages to get to that? Duh. Right? So while maybe those people didn't understand the target customer of SMB or the specific MSP industry, they understood organizational scale and communication. And my goodness, when you have a team focused together, when you have them doing the right things, growing in the right direction, it works. So my board was right. Hopefully they don't see this because I don't like them knowing that. But they were right. They do exist. And what I would encourage people to do is make sure, while growing your team in a non-threatening way, bring in somebody who's done something bigger. So when you're sitting in the room together, assuming you do want to grow bigger, which it's okay if you don't, by the way, but if you do, have somebody who's done it before, because it's going to save you a lot of cycles. And chances are they've made a lot of mistakes along the way that they
Yeah.
can bring in and help you avoid.
We went through a similar journey at ScalePad, EOS focused, finding a little bit of difficulty with cascading messaging, and also incorporated OKRs. And more I come across businesses that are in that same exact fork in the road. It's like we need something that is in addition to EOS, and that combo seems particularly powerful, and more folks I hear talking about it. So there's some power, a new level unlocked there for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, One of the interesting challenges I think for MSP owners, and you got to forgive me because I wear the 10-person MSP hat most of the time. That's what I used to have, and so I kind of always see things through through that lens. Um, is how much we worry about stuff, and something you said yesterday when we were chatting about today was that
Worrying is a wasted emotion, right?
worrying is a wasted emotion. I love that so much. And there's many stoicism parallels to that. Don't worry until it's time to worry type of thing. And this is maybe something that is like, it's very closely related to the art of the craft. You know, it's kind of this duty of care that I think we feel inherently in the role that we have in all these things. But you also have to reach a point where if the client doesn't care or they don't want to participate, you're kind of expending all this energy and worry for no reason. I'm curious how you handle this at scale in particular, because I'm sure this multiplies with so many folks.
Yeah, I mean, again, there's a lot to unpack there. So I'm going to take your question and I'm going to compartmentalize it. First, on the human level of just emotions in general, what I have learned over the last few years is these emotions exist for a reason and you can acknowledge them, right? So when a worry comes up, as much as I like to say that phrase, worry is a wasted emotion, if I just shove it down, it's still there and it's impacting me in real ways. So instead, and by the way, this works with sadness and anger and you name it, right? So instead, I'll go, hi, worry. I understand why you're there right now. It makes sense that you would be concerned that you have this client who is refusing MFA. I'm trying to now tie this into what you're referencing, who is refusing MFA and doesn't, want it at all. And I know it's going to explode. And then I'm going to tell you the rest of the story. Then they're going to blame it on me. Then they're going to make me fix their network. I'm going to spend thousands of hours doing this, getting rid of the ransomware. They're still not going to be happy. They're going to think I could have prevented it if I did something else, and then they're going to fire me, right? That's going to be
The
the
train of thought.
catastrophizing that came from that worry. But just acknowledging it for a minute and going, hey, you exist. This is the story I'm telling myself. What if I could just frame that to the client and connect with them in a real way over that, right? So what if it's not, hey, look, I'm not here to force you to do anything. But when you rejected the MFA, I felt a little icky. And the reason I felt icky is because I played this story out. The reason I have this story of where this is going to lead down the line is because I've seen it time and time and time again. So again, client, let me please advise you to do this, right? It's only this much money, and here's what it can prevent. And then finally, if they're still like, no, one, sometimes you ask, is this really the right customer for you? But, revenue is important, especially in a growing organization. So sometimes you have to hold on. And by the way, especially in a small organization, you have to hold on. So in those cases, we document and we have the customer effectively acknowledge that they're choosing to go in a different way, but we still love them, we care about them, we're going to support them. But if something happens, we expect to be compensated to resolve it.
I love that. This brings up a book you mentioned, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, I think is what it was called.
Yeah.
And more often than not, I hear MSP experts, people that have been there and done that, talking about how a lot of the issue is being inside the bottle, not being able to read the label, being in your own way effectively. And so tell me a little bit about this book and how this maybe all correlates to some of these things, because I think the way we relate to clients has to do sometimes with the fact that we're showing up as ourselves, and that's not necessarily compatible with how the client needs us to show up. There's all these potential mismatches and things that are challenges about being ourselves sometimes.
Absolutely. So this book was actually recommended to me by seven people before I picked it up. So it was the seventh person in like a 3 month period, and I'm like, okay, it's a sign. Somebody's trying to tell me something. Let me read this book, and it's Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself by Dr. Joe Dispenza, and he's like leading um, guru on meditation. And by the way, this is a super complicated book. It talks about alpha, beta, theta brain waves, and ultimately, the point of it is how you can understand your brain waves and control when they're firing, so that you respond instead of react, so that you process things differently. Very, very, very powerful, but very technical, very scientific. The first three chapters of this book were effectively focused, though, on proving that at a subatomic level, your thoughts become reality. The next three chapters go back like 5,000 years in history and cite case after case after case of people who did this. Their thoughts become reality. So if our thoughts, and by the way, I've got plenty of personal stories to share about this, like, and what, hell, I'll start there. Uh, and then I'll tie it back to how we as an MSP can show up for the customer. But for me, I realized after reading those first three chapters that my thoughts were all bracing for impact and preparing for the shit to hit the fan. And it would always hit the fan, and I'd be ready for it and we'd handle it. But it was just always hitting the fan. When's the next time the client's going to get hit by ransomware? How are we going to react to that? Da 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 da. And it was just bracing for impact. And I went, oh no. I need this script, right? Like, I need to go, what do I want, right? So I mean, this I happen to do it for myself, where it broadened from how I want to show up for my children, the impact that I want to make on people, how I want to empower and grow my team and my clients. And I was very specific about it. And heck, I mean, again, deeply personal. One line in it was, I want to teach yoga sculpt for joy and impact. Yoga sculpt, as an aside, for me, was something I accidentally tripped into about a year and a half ago that changed my life and got me the closest to meditation over anything else, because there was so much happening at once: music and lifting weights and breath work and lights and just crazy stuff. So I put that in there because it made such a big impact to me that I wanted to deliver it forward to others. And just one day after I wrote these thoughts down, recorded it, and played it back to myself. And by the way, I've been playing it back to myself every morning since. One day, I go to a class and notice somebody new who's next to me. They say they work there from corporate, and it winds up being a senior leader. And I wind up asking her, or really sharing my manifestation with her, and she immediately offers flexibility in teacher training, my own time slot, so on and so forth. Like, how could I have made that happen in the universe? Well, I didn't make it happen. It's all around you. It's just where you choose to put your attention. So, okay, let's relate this back to that person who's rejecting MFA, and how can we position ourselves and believe in ourselves that we're able to speak the language of the customer, that we're able to share the stories and the experiences that can help them be successful. And if we start framing ourselves like that and manifesting that, instead of, oh, they don't understand this, they're just going to fight about it, they're not going to want to spend the money, here's all my retorts for it, you get very different experiences. So if you believe anything that I just said, which it's okay if you don't, but your thoughts become reality, choose your thoughts very, very carefully.
Have you seen the TikToks or Instagram reels of the 22-year-old Olympian Eileen Gu going on this rant about controlling her thoughts and therefore being able to control who she is? It's really interesting because it's kind of reminding me of this entire conversation in the best possible way. And it's made the rounds because, like, psychologists and people that study the brain and all these folks have picked up on it and are going on to explain some of the things that she talked about and is mentioning. And it's a powerful thing to do when you do it as a collective. Imagine, obviously the power of the movement of the organization in that scenario. And by the way, I think Ntiva would also be a great name for a chain of yoga studios if it ever comes to bear. So just throwing that out there.
Noted.
I want to double back quickly. We have, a few more minutes, and maybe this will be the topic that closes us out. just bringing back this conversation about how we show up for the customer. So many of my conversations lately, including one last night with Peter Melby from New Charter, was really about this idea of like, what is the client experience that we're trying to create? And it kind of hit me that I don't know that we've really defined what this better or improved client experience actually is. Like, what is it? Is it a human thing? Is it a tech thing? I think we're trying to put tech definition on it potentially, since that's the business we're in. But I wanted to ask you how you think of the client experience.
Look, the client experience is the most important thing you can deliver, right alongside team member experience, because they go hand in hand. Clients are going to have better experiences when your team members are having better experiences. But what the hell does that mean, right? Like, you could throw out those words. So let's be clear. Number one, without customers, we don't exist. So we have to recognize that they are the center of our universe. Number two, I think I said it earlier on in here, like, we're a people business, right? Like, we don't have intellectual property. We're mostly enabling other people's technology and, hopefully switching over time to what's best. So we really have to double down on that human element, right? So how do you create a great customer experience? You understand what their needs are, right? And look, I can give you a blanket statement, and I'll give you a blanket statement from what I've seen across 3,000 clients in multiple different industries, across the country. And I'll share that, but I'll note that when you get into specific industries or specific customers and sizes in industries, listening to them and understanding what they want as an experience matters, right? And it's going to customize per industry. It's going to customize based on their growth goals, et cetera, et cetera. But here's the swath, right, across 3,000, right? I think this applies across the board. The technology has to work. Like, we need to be invisible in our processes, right? Nobody cares that it's going from this engineer to this engineer to that engineer to this engineer. Nobody wants to see your processes. Your processes need to be invisible to the customer. The technology simply has to work. But Lewis, what happens when it just works? Customers wonder why they pay us. What happens when something goes wrong? Customers wonder why they pay us. So it can't just end there. Yeah. It has to go to the next level, which is one, giving them in a clear, concrete way the ability to access and see what's been done behind the scenes and quickly. And number two, and most importantly, helping them use technology to further their mission. I call it creating competitive advantage. The reality is, if we bring clients technology for them while it's a competitive advantage, we move the needle for them in a really big way. And it's only a matter of time, months, maybe a year or two, before that competitive advantage turns to competitive necessity. And when it moves to necessity, meaning everybody's doing it, it goes back to, how are you invisible with it? How are you delivering it at the lowest cost with operational excellence? So I'm not sure that totally answered your question, but like, the client experience varies per client and you need to listen to them. But across the board, I'll say again, we want to be invisible in our process. The technology just needs to work, and we need to be strategic, showing them where the proverbial puck will be going and helping them get there first if it moves the needle for their business or their mission.
Yeah, I resonate with that deeply. Man, I love all the stuff we've been talking about. I love the curiosity, the appetite for learning. I think this is something that, as I get older, I find more people really, really digging into that curiosity, that learning and stuff. But I'll close with this last question. I'd love to know if there's something that you have maybe had a long-held belief about that you had to unlearn, or something that you challenged yourself on that you pivoted around.
Oh man, there's so many. I think we covered some already in this session today. Long-held belief. Ask me that one more time.
Have you had to unlearn something, a long-held belief that you challenged and were able to overcome because the information changed, the context changed, something that informed you differently, and you were willing to reevaluate challenge the status quo?
I feel like we covered a lot of this, so I'm going to actually go on a personal side. And for many, many years, I felt leveraging therapists, psychiatrists, anything with mental health was a sign of weakness, and it wasn't real. And through personal recommendations and professional recommendations years ago, I started to really spend time learning about my psychology and how my brain works and what my emotions are trying to tell me, and just understanding what's happening. And through doing that, I mean, my whole perspective has changed, right? I can be with people who are irate and angry, and I don't internalize it as if I've done something wrong. I can see it's their thing.
Mm.
And when I see it's their thing, I can approach it with empathy and understanding and openness. And it's allowed me to really understand people at a deeper level, connect quicker, get past the noise, and really have meaningful connection. And a thing that is so important to me, like I've been doing this for so long, and it's such a hard job, but it's a great job too. The joy on the journey, right? So I don't have anything anymore that I hold as a truth that I wouldn't be willing to hear another perspective or be open to learning about, right? Like it's so important to have that open mind and be willing to listen and understand and grow from each other.
Fantastic. I love it. What a journey, man. What a journey to be on. I'm excited, for the first time in many years, excited for what's ahead, and not sort of leaning so much into the past.
Yeah,
So
that's for sure. But one thing I guess is true, right? In our field, if there is an issue, it's probably always going to be DNS. Like that has been.
all right, man. Well, this has been fantastic. I can't thank you enough for spending a little bit of time with me, hanging out, and chatting about these things. I appreciate you sharing some of your personal journey and stuff. So thank you. Folks, this has been Stephen Freidkin, CEO and founder of Ntiva, joining us today for MSP Confidential. We're here every Friday at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. We'll catch you on the next one. Stephen, hang out backstage for 2 secs while I